Hey everybody, it's Jane Johnston with the BriarHillGroup at REMAX Commercial, host of Vancouver Island Time and of Community Talks daily at 4:30 here in Victoria, British Columbia. I am here with Michelle Francis. Michelle is here to talk about racism in real estate. She's a commercial realtor in Ontario and a member of the Law Society of Ontario. She's a certified adult educator and a dual-designate HR practitioner. She has held successful senior leadership roles within education and the community, and she is the current president, chair, Women of Durham County Family Court Clinic, championing governments and diversity and inclusion. She's also the former vice chair in strategy and education for the Habitat for Humanity and director of cultural intelligence for the Progress Career Planning Institute. Michelle supports our industry as the first Black female facilitator in the new Salesperson Program at the Humber College in Toronto and sits on the City of Pickering Culture and Tourism and Scarborough Health Network Ontario Health Teams, Patient and Family Advisory Committees. Oh my goodness, what an introduction. She's been featured in Sales Performance Magazine, Huffington Post, and Financial Post. She has been a mentor to student practitioners and consultant on the educational restructure of the designation programs for the HRPA and consumer protection focused on educational requirements for RECO, Humber, and NIIT Consortium. She plays a major role in her clients' businesses by utilizing her knowledge of HR law to provide sustainable and strategic programs and solutions designed to unleash leadership potential, drive performance, and increase organizational effectiveness culture. So welcome, Michelle.
Thank you for having me. That was a mouthful.
I know, I'm sorry. The text was too small. So I'll just introduce myself. I'm a realtor. I'm actually originally from downtown Toronto. I moved out to the West Coast 20 years ago in Victoria after teaching here from 1995 to 1999 at Pearson College. And I ended up living on the campus of Pearson College. And eventually I was a house parent there. So the purpose of, or the mandate of Pearson College is to unite people through education and to promote international understanding. So I've always felt my heart lay at Pearson College. We now live off the campus about 10 kilometers away. But I've always followed what my students are doing, and I'm interested in talks like racism and, you know, being a white person. And obviously I haven't experienced it. I have been the only white person in a room, for sure, in downtown Toronto in my classroom, but I haven't obviously experienced it the way you have. And I think that if we need to fix this problem of racism, then we need to acknowledge it and bring it to the forefront. So thank you for agreeing to come today.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
All right. So first of all, the reason why I invited you was because I heard you speak on with Sarah Kulke on her podcast, and she did an amazing job. And I just thought we could have a discussion about what's happening in your world with racism in real estate.
Yes. So the interesting piece about the timing of this discussion is they say when you talk about something, you manifest it. So we talked about racism in real estate, and all of these prime examples started to come to the forefront. So the question is, you know, is there really racism in real estate? And I'd have to say, unfortunately, there is. Real estate is not unique in that respect. But yes, we do have some challenges like the rest of the world. So we're all coming to an awakening all at one time. And so we're looking a little bit deep, and the more we look, the more we realize that these isolated situations that we may have heard of or we may have witnessed aren't as isolated as we thought they originally were. So I'll give a personal experience first. As a renter, when I was first moving actually out of my mother's home, or my family home, I should say, was, so my complete name is Michelle Leong Francis. So I have a very Asian middle name. And I remember I was going to live in downtown Toronto on Spadina. So I don't know if you remember what Spadina kind of looks like.
Yeah.
Predominantly Chinese. And so I thought, at that time, I must have been in my early 20s. I didn't know really much about different cultures. I really was quite naive. I thought everyone was like me, whatever I thought they thought. And I was told very clearly that this was probably not the best place for me to live, because everyone who lived down here was Chinese. Now, at the time, that was the hot spot. Toronto, black market, Spadina. I was living on student income. It just worked out perfect for me. But as I started to really embrace what was told to me by the property manager, she was quite blunt. That is your overt racism. You're not supposed to live here, and you're not wanted here, and the middle name is not going to save you in this situation. And so that was my first experience with housing and racism. So I was going to be a renter at that particular time in a co-op housing establishment, which, you know, I don't know if you know much about co-op housing. It's really a community that comes together. So that was perfect for me. I was very much a community person. I do a lot of volunteerism. I thought I can embrace myself into this culture of being downtown Toronto. And it was a rude awakening when I was informed that I was not wanted. And so that was my first glimpse at racism. And so as I moved further east, so I've been moving east ever since. So I moved now into Toronto proper, Scarborough area, and that gave a different dimension. I lived in Markham before I moved and raised a family in Durham region where I reside now.
Right.
And it has changed its face many times based on the different cultures I've moved in and around, and based on how I showed up. So when I showed up as a renter, it was different versus when I showed up as an owner, and very different when I showed up as a landlord now, having that hat and renting to people, and my interactions on the outside of all our affiliate partners in real estate. So that means your mortgage, your insurance, your contractors, very different experience. And all throughout, I've had different racial experiences, some overt, such
Right.
as you don't belong here, and then other ones that were quite subtle.
So talking about subtle, we were talking the other day about microaggression. So
Yeah.
Can you define that for us?
So I will put it in the simplest terms. So microaggression is, I'll give the example of the hints that the property manager was giving me when I was somewhere around 19. Microaggression is, maybe you don't want to live here. These people may not be the right people for you to hang around with, or the reverse to me. You know, the culture's a little bit different. Someone like you might want to be, you know, in Scarborough or in wherever they thought there would be more of a community that looked like me. And so I always say I'm a little hard of hearing. So what goes subtly for me eventually turns into overt because I didn't know how to read the signs.
Right.
And that's when I came out and said, no, this is not the place for you. There is 99.9% Chinese people speaking Chinese, not like myself, first generation Canadian. And so therefore, this is not the place for you. It needed to be, for me, that clear and between the eyes. So
Well,
microaggression can show up that way.
I think also when you're that age, I remember as well, you know, you're optimistic, and it just kind of hits you over the head.
Absolutely.
I remember applying for a rental too, and I thought, well, why wouldn't anyone take me?
Yeah. And it's funny because the normal things that you would worry about why someone would want you there, and you know, I was raised, so please don't take this personally or hate me after, but my mother was one of those horrible people that sends out manila envelopes. So she worked for Revenue Canada. So I learned very early how to have very good credit, make sure you're on top of your bills, you know, just be the model citizen as far as credit and credit worthiness was considered. And that was one of the viable pieces for getting housing and renting and later on being able to purchase and become a landlord. So I couldn't imagine that I was being denied somewhere to live because I'm the perfect person, you know, good job, articulate, living the big dream of living downtown Toronto, which never happened for me.
Yeah.
I think I was a bit scarred and thought, well, I'll move somewhere entirely different, which was a blessing in disguise, actually. So yes, microaggressions, I think it's important to really have an example of what that looks like, because the overt you get, it beats you over the head, as you mentioned. Yeah, and I mentioned right between the eyes.
Right.
But it's the subtle things that I think create deep wounds, and that's the part that really is concerning for most people who are engaging with the real estate industry, but also on the receiving end as a home purchaser or renter.
So I'm just wondering then, I can see it happening if somebody writes an offer and their name shows up on the contract and the seller or buyer doesn't want to deal with that person. Have you experienced that?
So my name, as I said, can be very, as we say, generic. Michelle Francis, Durham region. There's 18 of me out here, and I get carded at the library. However, because of the work that I've done in cultural intelligence with PCPI that you mentioned before, I've had to coach many newcomers to Canada on how to navigate Canadian culture. And some of that has to do with, you know, how your name shows up on a resume or how your name shows up on an application, and whether or not someone will make a prejudgment about you and demonstrate their bias based on how many characters you have in your name, whether that be 2 or 13. And so, yes, from the coaching side of newcomers who are just trying to settle in what they've been told has been the greatest opportunity for them, and then they land and arrive and find barriers to settlement, which one of the biggest pieces of settlement is finding somewhere to live.
Right.
And so,
do you find they, I grew up in Toronto, and I just found historically what happened was, so if I had a friend living there, I would move into that neighborhood because that friend would offer a warmer welcome than elsewhere in the city. So that's why you end up getting Little Italy, you know, Greek town
communities.
Yeah.
Certainly. You will get pockets of communities for that reason. And that's almost generational. So I'm noticing now with a lot of the younger, I don't like saying younger folks because I seem to, you know, I feel like I'm young at heart. So for lack of a better word, some of the younger folks, they're willing to explore. They'll move. They're not as grounded in terms of I need to be, you know, within walking distance of a community that I feel represents me. Mm-hmm. So they'll go and explore. And so in lies the challenge. Mm-hmm. So when they decide to spread their wings, they may walk into communities that have never seen someone like them. I live in Durham region. If I go about 40 minutes further east, people will look at me as though I am, you know, a unicorn. You know, it's like, wow. And it's that simple.
Yeah.
And so, yes, when you're, of course, writing an offer, it's very clear. You can see the name, you've seen other names. So yeah, people are having true challenges. And I'm just going to give a referral back to some of the most recent headlines of those challenges that people have faced. And there was a young lady just recently who has expressed great concern because she said, I don't have a chance of getting housing because someone sees my name, or may not recognize the name as being associated with any particular cultural group, but once they meet her, she says like the game is over. And that's the challenge that we're facing right now.
It's funny, Victoria's just starting to become international, I would say. It was a very white culture, probably until about 5 years ago, and I think it's kind of hit the international scene. So to me, yes, visible minorities, we notice them, and I have friends who are Black, and he has trouble finding a place to get his kids' haircut because there isn't somebody right now who does that. Just like there are special needs within communities that have to be addressed, and so that comes with time. But
absolutely. So I'll just read the heading. This comes from the Global News. So it says, "What it's like to rent as a Black Canadian. I don't even have a chance." And so, we're talking right now of the two polar extremes. We're talking white and Black, but it represents everything on the in-between. And so I can speak, yes, from my experience as a young renter, moving into a predominantly Asian community, even having an Asian name did not make the difference for me in that scenario. But we're noticing, and there are stats to speak at which we can share after, that people are really struggling, predominantly Black, Asian, South Asian, I should say. There are pockets of the city where people are challenged even more so. And so I want to move to kind of, well, why are people having challenges? So as realtors, which we both are, how do we show up in this whole conversation? And you and I have talked about this, Jane. We've seen many things, the both of us, but what I'm seeing as of late is, so we've all collectively been on a hiatus for 3 months. So relatively all industries. And so everyone's coming out, out of hibernation, like a bear, hungry for new business, right?
Oh, right, yeah.
We want to get back to what we do best and what is our passion. And so it's sometimes difficult to be able to draw that line when a client may recommend that they want, a person who's got purple hair, they're 3'2", they wear whatever on their hands, whatever that description looks like. And you and I both know our industry has taken such a significant change as of late that we've changed our education forum to have a really big push on consumer protection.
Right.
And consumer protection doesn't just mean our financial fiduciary responsibility, but it also speaks to very deeply our ethical and our human rights responsibility as advocates for our client, but also advocates for the community. And so we have a very fine balance that we are trying to navigate. And so when a client says, I'm looking for a particular person, we need to take a step back and say, why is that? And so, when I talk about the hungry bear, the bear doesn't want to ask, those questions, because it might mean that client may not be happy with you, may decide to go somewhere else. But we have to remember, before we went into hibernation, we took ethics and code of conduct, and we signed on the dotted line to say we will uphold our community and we will uphold human rights, of which race and discrimination are protective grounds, or at least discrimination based on race as a host of a number of other elements are protective grounds that we really don't have the opportunity to skirt.
Yeah, I find, well, let me ask you a question. So first generation versus next generation and next generation. When I was teaching, I found there was a differentiator there between kids who were new to the country and their expectations around people's behavior, and those who were second or third generation. They seemed better equipped to navigate everything. Am I wrong in that assumption?
Well, I'll say this. So I have family members that were not born in this. Actually, my entire family was not born in this country. So when I look at them versus myself, I am a different beast. I'm far more outspoken. My family comes from a culture where females are seen and not heard. I clearly did not get the memo. And so therefore, I am as Canadian, outspoken, righter of wrongs. And so I navigate, yes, because I have a broad spectrum of experiences, and I've gone out and seen more of the world.
And you call it when you see it, right?
Yes.
Whereas a new Canadian might feel they don't have the power yet.
Absolutely. I mean, let's put it this way. If you're relocating and you're bringing an entire family, your focus is, if you looked at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I am trying at the base level to get food, shelter, and keep everyone safe.
Yeah.
And I don't really have time to right wrongs unless they come very close to home and my life is being threatened. Then when you already have that established, where that would be your first gen, myself, I say, well, I've got all those things. I was already educated here. I know the lay of the land. I've had more interaction with other Canadians, so I don't have to worry about that. Now I have a voice and I can contribute more. So I'm actually expanding my network and my circle. And now when I look at my kids, when I talk about these matters, mind you, they have never really gone through anything like a pandemic. So they've never seen a recession. They've never seen a pandemic. So this is like novelty for them. And so they have a very different way of navigating in the world. Now, that is not to say that racism doesn't exist for them. It shows up differently.
Yes.
And as the generations move away from their family and what used to be, they are willing to be curious about each other and ask questions. Why are you eating this? Why do you live like this? How many people live in your home? So it's not this taboo. We've been raised on the term taboo.
Right.
I would suggest that my children don't even know what that word means.
Well, I found at Pearson, it's funny because being an international school, everybody immediately goes, I'm Jane, I'm from Canada, or I'm Susan, I'm from the United States, or I'm Bill, I'm from, South Africa, or whatever. There were 86 countries, I think, represented. Yeah. So then it was interesting, having lived there for 4 years, I would meet people and go, I'm Jane, I'm from Canada. And people would go, what? Don't do that. Right. But, I was just curious where people were from, and they saw that as you're asking me about where I'm from.
Yes.
Yes, I am, because I'm interested to know, what's your history?
So you hit a very good point. And the point is, when we refer to each other, and I made that comment about black and white, and I did on the other interview or discussion that we had, that you and I met, when we refer to people as black and white, we neutralize and eliminate their history, their culture, what makes them cool, what makes them interesting. We just see them as two colors, right? A color does not describe the depth of a person. And I think if we could start using our language differently and replace that with curiosity, right, which you've just expressed, and both of us have that opportunity because we're in education. And I believe there's some other people who are on this call that are in education or training. And I think one of the things I've learned about facilitating, training, education, instructing is the curiosity piece. And when you're curious, you learn more. You tend not to say, oh, that white person or that black person. You say, oh, Jane that rides the horse. Jane that eats sushi at lunch. It's really different. We expand our world. But when we talk about real estate, it can show up in very different ways. Some of the challenges that we have in real estate. And I just wanted to kind of hone back in on that because I want to give some people some real examples of what it could look like. So I've had a very long and deep corporate life before getting into real estate. I spent 14 years buying, renovating my own properties and being a landlord for probably far too long. And so my experience is very different. You know, I've had people, as I mentioned before, suggest not moving here, not buying this. And what does that really do to all that are involved? So I'll take a step away and I'll say myself as an investor, as a purchaser, I contribute to the community by providing housing for people.
Right.
And so if someone is suggesting based on their perception of maybe my ability to afford without asking, then I'm not able to contribute to a community by providing housing for someone. And I will further expand that my ability to provide housing, wearing my HR hat, allows someone to have employment. Without a stable place to live, employment doesn't happen. Without a stable place to live, childcare does not happen. Without a stable place to live, people don't contribute to community and our economy.
And I think really what's happened with the pandemic is that it just magnified all of that, especially the housing piece, because of, you know, and here in BC, what they did was they protected all the tenants. So no evictions. They made sure everybody was safe. So the first layer of Haslow's hierarchy of needs was met.
Right, absolutely. And then when you look at the other side, so let's talk about the realtor. So say I have a client and my client says to me, I don't want this particular type of person. And now as the realtor, I may feel that I am bound by not being able to really service my client unless I follow their every need. Not understanding, one, REBA, which we still, well, at the moment, that is our governing legislation. And it specifically says that, yes, we are to support and service our client, but there is a real fine, I would say, yellow line in the thing, that solid yellow line that says, we're not to cross over on anything that is illegal. And providing someone, not providing, someone with housing is illegal because that now encroaches on human rights. And we're seeing more and more. I remember when I was, advocating for landlords in the tribunal, landlord and tenant tribunal, you would still have, room to sit. Now it's standing room only. People cannot afford to go without housing, so they're willing to fight.
Right.
And so as a realtor, we need to really explore our participation in not providing people with housing and how that skirts on, maybe getting closer and closer to that edge of either having an issue with our regulator and breaching our legislation, but also with human rights.
And we are really, I'm just thinking like the parallel between the people who are new to Canada and the realtor is the navigator. The realtor is the facilitator. The realtor brings them further up in Maslow's hierarchy of needs because now they know how to play the game. So they're the ones who we have a really important role.
I think, it's funny, when I'm in class and I'm speaking to new salespersons about the role of a realtor, I really, really drill down on, stand in your role, because it is a housing, either someone's renting or someone's purchasing, is the largest commitment that one person can have the gift to embark on. And as you mentioned, we are the facilitator and we need to take our responsibility very seriously. On a social level, it can impact your reputation because everyone, as I say, has been on hibernation and they've been becoming experts on how to videotape everybody.
Oh, right.
So people are now taking this, this approach of, I'm going to help regulate our society by videotaping, calling people out. So yes, a lot of people now are videotaping. For instance, when we weren't supposed to have open houses, there were too many people at this open house, videotape and send it into someone. But they're starting to do that recording, of course, when people are giving them suggestions, either microaggression or overt discriminatory conversations. And I would say that we will probably see on the horizon more and more litigation surrounding that, because housing is very scarce and very limited.
So how do we call out the microaggression or racism? How do we as realtors say, hey?
Right. So we are very diplomatic. We are the premium negotiators. And so this is not foreign for us to know how to navigate conversation. It takes a willingness first. And after that, it's like the subtle conversation I got. And when your client doesn't understand, you need to be very direct. This is my responsibility. This is my legislation. And this is what we can do. And then sometimes with other clients, it's more so investigative. Well, why wouldn't you want to rent to Michelle? She's awesome.
Right. That's what I was thinking.
She's got good credit. She pays on time. She takes me for lunch. Now, why would you not? And be curious and lighthearted to explore. And maybe they might just reveal, I had a bad experience with a person that looked like Michelle.
Mm.
And then you can say, well, that was one person. We have, I don't know, maybe 1 billion people. The chances are you meet 2 Michelles, quite rare, like a unicorn. So therefore, I will do my due diligence as your advocate realtor to check this, check that, and be there for your client. So that speaks to now the long-standing relationship. So if you have any challenges, let me know. I've got an arsenal of partners that can help you navigate. So if it goes here, a conversation can happen. I know plenty of people that mediate, which I think that's where we're going to be headed to once the courts open up. I have plenty of people who are in the legal profession. And sometimes it's just as simple as, maybe you should talk to your tenant or talk to your whomever.
Yeah, address the concern. And it has to be factual. It can't
Absolutely.
be opinionated.
Right. I get a feeling about Michelle, the way she, walked, something was not right. Well, she's got a bad back, so she walks with a limp. It means nothing else. It's sometimes we're just like that. As human beings, we can have an accident once and relive it 1,000 times.
Nice.
And our brain cannot tell the difference between the first time it happened or the 50th time that we've replayed it in our head. And so sometimes it's about self-work to address, what our deep feelings are about a particular person or situation in order to explore that so we can eradicate it, we can move on with our lives. Because if we're talking about rental, and I say this all the time, the landlord and the tenant want the same thing.
Right. They want their place to be rented or whatever, and they want somebody else wants a place to live.
Exactly the same. And it's really, everybody's probably going, hey, that's so simple. Yes, it is. We just need to do our due diligence as we connect people together.
Do you think what's happening, do you think racism is the same in the States as it is in Canada? Or are we the same? Is it all happening at the same level?
I will say the headlines as of late would suggest that we are not far off the mark as the US. There have been, just this morning when I opened my email and I've been listening to it, in construction, there have been nooses hanging down on open construction sites. People are sending around documentation about the unethicalness of people of different cultures, not, I don't like the word race, but cultures, deciding to have marital relationships or of that sort. So on the surface, it would suggest that we're quite close. I think Canada wears racism well.
Hmm.
It exists, we just wear it differently. And, what I will say is this, where it's really, and you coined it perfectly, I think the pandemic and COVID has been the great magnifier of what was simmering below forever.
Right.
And
It's
so
just
now
weird. It's just so weird to me that, you squeeze the balloon here and this pops out. I just, on the one hand, I don't get it. And on the other hand, I'm seeing it and I'm just like in Victoria, there was anti-Asian
yes,
racism here.
sediment,
And
yes.
so a couple of friends of mine and I organized a dinner for homeless people. I didn't even know it was happening. It was brought to my attention. So we had Chinese restaurants cater a meal for the homeless people in downtown Victoria. And, it was a simple gesture to let them know that we were supportive of them. And we did Takeout Tuesdays. I promoted this thing called Takeout Tuesdays. And we always went to a Chinese restaurant because I felt we needed to support the Chinese culture here.
Yeah.
And it was just weird that to me, it's just like, I don't get it. I really don't get it. I don't get how the cause and effect, why is it happening now?
Well, I think it was always happening. It's not just now. I think the climate right now is an opportunity for some folks that they can air their dirty laundry that they've been harboring for some time, to put it on display, because no one will know it's me. Or I feel like I'm in a community of people who feel the same way I feel.
I think also there's like a big, actually, on the positive note, there's people who are willing to deal with it and support and not ignore it anymore.
And there's that side. I will give, there is a gentleman in particular that is a realtor. He has been posting daily about the new things that he has learned about African, quote unquote, Black culture and slavery that he never knew, or the conquests of certain parts of the world that he had never knew. And I will tell you this, people are starting to realize, by not knowing, they feel like they've been wrong done by in their education, that something was taken away from them, because how do I get to be 60 or 50 or 70 and not know that these things don't exist? And so that opens another door, which you and I belong to. That's the education system, which we won't go there because that's a whole other thing that we could deal with. But education, as it relates to real estate, is an opportunity,
Right,
for those brokerages that want to show up differently post-COVID,
right,
that want to get the stronger salespersons to join their brokerage, to show up the way we should as professionals, to raise the bar, hashtag. We'll start to embrace these conversations, know that they might be uncomfortable. People will squirm in their chair. I might not know it's like going to Sunday school and not knowing the song. I did that all the time. But we're all gonna learn together, myself included, because I don't know everything about everything.
right.
But I do know enough, and I have the willingness to share. And if someone comes and says something like, which I've heard many times, Michelle, I'm not a racist, I've got a friend who is. And I say, that phrase alone is not cool. That is part of the problem. So when we are something, we don't announce we are it. If I'm a good person, I don't go around telling everyone I'm a good person.
Right.
I demonstrate it.
Right.
I live it, I breathe it. People feel it. I demonstrate it. And so that if I could say that is the biggest difference, that is one of the important things that I would like to bring across. And so don't say that anymore, because if you are, first of all, I'm an energy person, so I feel people's energy right away. And so I've had to become that because I needed other skills to be able to assess people other than their word.
So I'm thinking that our post-licensing course needs to change.
So there is an opportunity, there is a window open, which COVID has presented, pandemic COVID. It's presented an opportunity for people to have conversations like you and I.
Yeah.
Very candid, like the one we're having here, or very structured, such as the ones I've delivered to law firms on cultural intelligence, which is a little bit different than diversity and inclusion. It is about learning about different cultures and what are the predominant characteristics or domains of those cultures. So when I meet a person and they don't make eye contact, or they don't shake my hand, or they won't eat from me, or they want me to eat from them, I don't take it as a personal slight. I get to understand more deeply their culture.
Right.
And based on how long they've been in the country, that may be more predominant than the Canadian culture that they're trying to adapt to. And some folks don't adapt for a lifetime, and some adapt immediately. Motivation, of course, is a factor in that. And as we talked about, those communities. So the homogeneous community doesn't allow for as much adaptation, right?
Right.
Adaptation, I should say. So we want to encourage people to kind of explore their community and move other places. And that's where you and I are the champions of really bringing to people's attention the beauty of Canada as a whole, and exploring, and people being curious about different foods and cultures and what makes them. I mean, it always is amazing to me. I have to say this point. It's always amazing to me that when I'm here in Canada, in Toronto, someone will not like, for instance, first of all, I was born here, so I don't cook West Indian food. Like my husband and I had to get recipe books on how to cook West Indian food, which is quite embarrassing. So I let the cat out of the bag, and my husband's a chef, so this is crazy. So we had to learn how to cook West Indian food, because when my family came here, they basically said, okay, we give up our old ways for the new ways.
Oh.
And so I had to learn how to be a Caribbean person. And so when people are not curious here about what I eat, I find it amazing that when I go on vacation and everybody's eating West Indian food, and it's like, can you take some of that curiosity and bring it back home with you? It's okay.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because I'm first generation Canadian. My parents are British. My dad was actually born in Singapore. So, but we were involved in Caravan every year. Remember Caravan in Toronto?
I do.
It was all about food and culture, and same thing at Pearson College. We had these international days, regional days, we called them, where we would be exposed to food and culture, and people would learn. And what it ended up doing was providing pride in the people who were presenting, right? And curiosity in the people who were partaking.
And we will come to find out, just food. I love food. I was born at noon and I married a chef. So there we go. I love food. It's an opportunity to sit down, be curious about food, be curious about a culture, and we will come to find out that the one thing I'm eating is actually the same thing you're eating by a different name, or the thing that now you are using to, like, anti-age as an example, So all the things that I may have been razzed about when I was a kid, what is that you're eating? You're eating watermelon, you're eating banana, or you're eating coconut, now are like the hot topics for everyone to have. So I was just ahead of the curve.
Yeah.
So I just want to make sure I really kind of hit home that Yes, racism is alive and well in Canada. I experienced overt racism very early in my life. I've also experienced a death as a result of racism in my own family, and had to go through the healing process of that. And so I'm kind of like the poster child for kind of navigating what's going on in the world right now, because my father was a police officer. My kids have gone through police training. And so I navigate that world because I'm able to see the human inside of all of this mess that we're trying to straighten up. And I come across extremely curious about life. And I do honestly believe that people are good. They may have had a bad experience, which has jaded them, and they're living, a death by 1,000 cuts.
Right.
When there was only one. And so let's start that healing process. So as far as being a realtor, I take that badge very, very seriously. And I understand the importance and the residual effects of people not having somewhere to lay their head or a safe place to go. And so I think we all need to understand, and if we're not getting it through our education, for whatever reason, we need to take an independent approach and seek it out.
Right. Which is what we're doing today.
Absolutely.
So your prediction for the future?
So my crystal ball. So my predictions really are, we are going to continue to have these kinds of conversations, and it may not look the way that we would like it to look. So, many of us who from my community would love for people to just have open, honest, clear conversation. I don't know that all of it will take that approach.
No, I think you need action.
I think people are curious, and they may, I've gotten a lot of DMs on social media where people show up one way in a group.
Right.
And then will send me a private message. Okay, can you send me some resources? Which I'm grateful for, however it shows up. And so
their actions aren't true yet. They're moving in that direction.
What we need to, as humans, we like community and we like homogeneity. So we don't want to rock the boat. So we'll do our research in the back, or we'll ask questions in the back. And so long as they're asked, I'm fine with that. My predictions for the future as realtors, we will have to up our game, and we will have to raise the bar. Those who are being affected and losing their opportunity to have a safe place and a place to raise their families and a place to be able to secure employment, especially now, the government will step in because they want everyone to go back to work.
Right.
And community members will step in because we live in Canada, we get snow, and people we're not in paradise, so we can't sleep on the beaches. So people will force that envelope, and we will find lawyers they may not have been entertained by this type of work in the past, but they will start going to landlord and tenant. They will start going to human rights. There are a number of cases, and I can show a lot of case law that speaks to this, and it's starting to grow. So rather than being forced, I would impart upon everyone to just be curious and embrace, because whether we look at discrimination for being a female, having a mobility problem that we're navigating, a intellectual or mental health issue that we're navigating, we still need to get back to the place where we're supporting everyone, because at some time or another, it may not be the color of your skin, and we are all susceptible to that.
Right.
So our profession needs to stand strong, and we need to be, each of us as individuals, we need to be advocates for the right way of doing business. And yes, I mentioned before, and I think I scared people, we will lose some business. But if
I'm okay with that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm okay with that.
Absolutely. Because if I lose business because I'm doing the right thing, and then you are doing the right thing, so they run to you, eventually a client who has ill intentions will have nowhere else to run.
Right. Awesome. Okay, so on that note, let's open it up here and just see if anybody has any questions. I'm going to ask you guys to take yourself off put yourselves on camera, I guess. Okay. If you guys have any questions, you can put them in the chat box. I know one person cannot ask questions right now. Oh, they're saying, hey, Will, how's it going?
I'm good, thanks.
Do you have any questions of Michelle?
No, but it was a lot of really great information and very smart and eloquently put. I'm going to be processing this for a while, I think.
Exactly. Isn't she awesome?
Thank you so much for this event, Jane.
You're welcome. Will's a realtor in Victoria. Nathaniel, you have your audio off. Go ahead.
Oh, good information. Glad to be here. I was a little bit late to the party, so I may have missed a little bit. But yeah, it's a lot of stuff going on right now, and I do believe that in addition to a lot of the things you've been discussing, I think recruiting is another really big issue there. I know less than 1% of all realtors are people of color, as well African Americans, and I believe, at least here in South Florida, I'm licensed. I work here in Miami, between Miami and Atlanta, actually. And a lot of the stories I have from the stuff I do in the luxury space come from a place of not necessarily maliciousness, but more ignorance a lot of times.
Yeah.
And that's just because their lack of proximity to people of color. So a lot of those stereotypes get perpetuated because it's just a bit of an echo chamber. So as we sort of go out and make a more concerted effort to recruit more diverse people, I believe the services will then be reflected, in that diversity. So just my 2 cents.
I would agree with you there. I think there's an opportunity for brokerages to start having huddles that tackle these kinds of conversations in safe spaces within your brokerage, because people are being challenged. Our industry as individuals, we are being challenged with how to navigate. And so if we start exploring those things in the safe confines within our own brokerage, we can actually help each other to present some strategies to work around, for sure.
Definitely.
Thank you for being.
Yeah, I was going to say, so in South Florida right now, what's happening with real estate in general? Actually, I'm just curious.
Well, it's a very interesting time. Obviously, we have the same issues that you guys alluded to a little earlier as far as rents, both on the commercial side as well as the residential. So with a lot of the shutdowns, we just went into another partial shutdown now. They shut down the beaches for the 4th of July. So we're seeing that in the larger sense of things. What I've seen sort of as an ongoing trend is that the luxury stuff has, when I say luxury, I mean probably the top, say 10, 15% of the market. So the multi-million-dollar oceanfront condos, stuff like that. The new construction stuff has slowed down significantly. It hasn't stopped, but it's slowed a lot, and we see a lot of demand for affordable middle market, working class real estate, as well as multifamily is very, very big. One of the other things we're starting to see a bit of a push in as a direct result to the pandemic is single family homes for a lot of the snowbirds that are coming down. I got a couple calls from my Canadian clients, from New Yorkers that are like, hey, I love my condo before this, but now I really don't like it very much. I think I want that house. So we're seeing an uptick in the single family homes across the board, and especially in the affordable market. say 200 up to maybe the mid 5, 6s, it was already competitive. So now it's even more competitive among the qualified buyers. So before the lending requirements sort of tightened up, there were a lot more people. That pool of buyers was a lot larger. So the pool of buyers has gotten a little bit smaller, but the activity around those homes is still very, very strong. So if you're an agent that understands the fundamentals, you're still working.
Yeah, I found that there's been a movement towards moving out of multifamily dwellings. Our condo market is a little weak right now. What were you going to say, Michelle?
There's a now and forthcoming a lot of relocation, for sure.
Yeah, I think more to rural areas. Do you think? Away?
Well, because of, or at least there's a contemplation of relocation. Civil unrest will allow people who are directly affected and not so much to reconsider the future for their kids. It directly affects economy. So people are starting to look at countries that maybe have less tension. And so that is opening the door for a lot of relocation that's happening as well.
Yeah, we're getting inquiries from people in the States. We were getting inquiries before this for other reasons.
That was my PC comments to the relocation. But yeah, it's
anyway. But okay, so we're actually almost out of time here. Do you want to have any closing remarks, Michelle?
I am so completely grateful that you reached out to me to share the information, my experiences. And I would say, as realtors, we have a very tough job. It is very busy. There's a lot to learn. Our education, varies on the pendulum. And so the one thing we do have to understand that at the other end of those documents are human lives, and that people need somewhere to live, and we cannot make community with just one group of people living in one area of the world or the whole world. That's not what we're built on as human beings. And so I endeavor to challenge everyone who is listening on this call and any calls forthcoming to just be a little bit more curious, to ask questions, and to try. I know it's going to be hard, but try not to use these two words, black or white, especially when you're describing another human being.
And be kind.
Absolutely.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you. Maybe one day we'll do a workshop on this. That would be good. Nicole, do you have any questions?
Yeah, no, not really. I really enjoyed listening. It was great. I am in an area where all of our agents are white, and we live a mile from a community that is about 99% Black. So this is really good for us to learn how to, to make sure that we're talking correctly and we're using the right words, as we have so many different clients, and we have not been able to recruit, a whole lot of diversity in our office. So
Awesome.
Yeah, so thank you for sharing.
A challenge. Okay,
Yes.
well, let us know how it goes.
Okay.
I will leave the last comment that because I wear an HR hat as well, if you have any HR related questions as far as, some strategies or documents that you might need for recruitment, that might work for your community to attract, or that may be less, more appealing to a broader variety of people, just send a message, absolutely, through Jane, of course, and then I can help support in that way.
Awesome opportunity. Okay, thank you everybody for joining us. We may be back with a second version of this. We'll see if I can get Michelle to put herself out there again. Thank you everybody for joining us, and have a great day. And for Canadians, enjoy Canada Day. For the US, enjoy 4th of July. Take care. Bye-bye.
Be safe.